Okay, so it is time to add some functionality to our form here, or to our to-do list. So in our app, we need a way to add to-dos to our to-do list. So this is where we're going to start having some state. I'm going to start maintaining a list of to-dos inside the app. And so we are going to have a form here that adds to-dos. So I guess what we need is a new component. So from here, we're going to create a new component. It's going to be to-do form / to-do form.test.js and import screen and render from testing React. We're going to import to-do form from the parent and describe form with, same as always, it exists. Here I'm going to say it.todo as class. Okay. Some of the other things that it has, so it.todo adds a to-do, right? So let's start with existence, and in the existence part, we're going to say expect type of form string. This is going to fail, so we need to go define it. To do form.js function form export default form. Of course, it still fails because we have to add it to the index, wrong index. So here we're going to import form again in alphabetical order from to-do form / to-do form. And here we're going to come back and finish the export. Hopefully that passes our tests. Okay. Now, in the test here, it has a class of to-do form. So we're going to do our same usual test here, and we're going to say render to-do form, and const UI equals screen.getID test ID to form, expect UI class. Okay, that's going to fail. So we're going to go on to the form and fix it. We're going to return a form this time, not a div. And I'm going to say data test ID equals to do form and class name equals to do form. Okay, all our tests are passing. Now, it adds a to do is slightly more complicated because in order for it to add a to do, it's going to need to do something on submit where the form submits and then it adds to a, it calls a function, right? So that means that we have to ship in a handle submit function, which gets called later. So here we're going to say it means we have to do something like render to do form, and it's going to take in a handle submit function. And we have to mock this function out. So this form is going to be something like const mock handle submit equals jest.fn. And then this is going to be mock handle submit. Now in here, we're going to need to, once we've rendered the form, we need to fill it in, and we need to get all of, and we need to submit it actually. So what we'll do here is I'm going to make this a skip, and we're going to say it has an input for a to-do task. That's our next move, right? So here I'm going to say render to-do form, and then we'll say const UI equals screen dot, and here I'm going to say get by role, and I'm going to give it garbage. And when we do this, React testing library will tell us what the valid roles are. So there isn't one yet. I happen to know that this particular form is only going to have a single input in it. So it's going to be safe to get it by that role. So let's see, if I put this in here, the role is called text box. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to say get by role text box. And I'm going to name this as input now. And now what I want to do is actually type into this thing. And so to do that, we have to bring in fire event, I think. And I can say fire event dot type, and we're going to put in what we want now. This is going to be our task. So test task, and I'm pretty sure that this takes an input and like an element and then a thing. So we can do that. And fire event dot type is not a function, so I am going to pause the recording and see what my mistake is. Okay, so it turns out that my mistake was that fire event is not the thing I want to be using at all. So I need to import user event from React testing library user event. And now instead of fire event here, this is user event dot type. And that works, okay, and we can see it if we do screen.debug at this point. I should see, oh, it doesn't show me what the current value is. That's fine. Okay, so now that we've typed into it, I guess that it's a little bit premature. We want it to I just need to prove that it actually has one. So this whole user event thing is just a bit premature until adding it to do. So eventually this piece here and this piece here are going to have to go there in this test. But for now, all we have to do to pass the test is make sure that we have a text box. Okay. So in addition to an input for a text box, we also need a submit button. So we're going to say it has a submit button. And we're going to render the to-do form again. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say screen.getByRole. Give it garbage. And since I don't know what it is yet, we're going to come in here and add an input type equals submit. I'll just say value equals add new. And this time we have a button as an available role. So we'll say get by role button. Okay, and that test will now pass as well. So we can use this in the next test as well. So now we've got get by role. This is going to be const button equals that. And so we're going to type on it, and then we're going to click the button. And then we're going to expect that this handle submit function got called. So here we're going to expect mock handle submit to have been called once, and expect mock handle submit to have been called with. And here we're going to have task is test task. Right. So let's set this up a little bit, and I'm going to say const task equals an object that says task of test task. And here, instead of this, I'm going to say task.task. And this should have been called with, oh, what am I doing? This only needs to be a string. Task like that. Okay, now we're not going to skip anymore. We're going to let this test run, and of course it will fail. So, number of calls expected 1, number of calls we got was 0, and that's because we don't have a handle submit prop yet. So we're going to come here. Well, that's only part of the reason. But so here we're going to take in a handle submit, and we need to make this handle submit function, we need to call it on submit, right? So the problem is that we can't just say on submit handle submit, because this handle submit here has an event in it, but that one is going to actually take in a task. So here we need to something like equals do submit. Okay, and now we're going to create this function. So function do submit is going to take an event, and because this is a form, we need to stop it from re-rendering the page. So the default action is to re-render the page. We're not going to let that happen. Now, our input is incomplete. And our input is incomplete such that, so first of all, this should work now. Oh, it doesn't work yet because we still haven't called it. So here we're going to actually call handle submit. Only we're going to have to call it with the contents of the input, right? So here it did work, but it expected this. And if I actually send this, something like task with test task, this should pass the test. Okay. However, this doesn't actually finish our component correctly. We need to make sure that the input is what we are shipping in. So I'm going to need to use some state for this. So I'm going to say import use state from React. And here we'll const task and set task equals use state empty string. And then in the input on change, it's going to take in the error for no reason, or the event rather for no reason. We don't need it. Oh yeah, we do. Let me see. We do need it. we need to destructure out of this. We're going to take off event.target.value, and this is going to become the new value for task. Okay. With that, we should be able to simply submit this as task. And there we have it. Now everything is okay. So now our form does work, but a final thing that we're going to want here is that after we submit, we don't want the input to still have whatever was in it. So we're going to clear it out. So here I'm going to set task to be an empty string. I don't actually have a test for that right now. To be honest, it's not that important. But I guess I could expect it one more time here. Excuse me. I could expect it here one more time probably. But yeah, I'm not actually worried about it. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make sure that our app itself has the to-do form in it, and that I do care about. So I'm going to say it has a form for adding tasks. And in here, we're going to render app again. And we're going to say screen dot get my test ID to do form. So this test fails. Let's make sure it's here now. We'll bring it in, bring it up here. That passes the test. So now in the app, technically I could move some of that stuff around, but I actually don't have to. I could make a semi-integration test here, which maybe is not a bad idea. So it adds a task to the list. So with this test, basically what's going to happen is it forces me to get the to-dos all the way up and in now. So up until now, I've been adding to-dos through just through the tests. There aren't any to-dos in the actual app yet. So here we're going to render the app. Now I'm going to get my hands on the input now, enter something in it, and expect it to be okay. So here I'm going to say const task equals, and this is going to be test task. Now we're going to get the form. So, or rather the input, const input equals get by role or screen dot get by role. And we know that this is text box from before. Const submit equals screen dot get by role button. And we know we're going to need user event now to do some typing. So import user event from user event. Now we're going to user event dot type into the input task. And then we're going to instead of submit, I'm just going to call this button. I'm going to say button.click. And with this, I am now going to expect that we'll get the list itself. I have to get this, I think, after I interact. So const list equals screen get by, get it by test ID right now, to do list. And I'm going to expect the list to have text content of task. Okay, so now this whole thing crashes, and it's crashing because handle submit is not a function. So in here, this needs a function handle submit. And in this case, it's going to be add to do. So I'm going to go ahead and make a function for adding to dos. And this function is going to take in a to do. And actually, this needs to be defined a little earlier. So we're basically going to append this to an array of to-dos that already exists. And in order to do that, we need to have an array that already exists. So I'm going to go here and say import state from next const to-dos and set to-dos equals use state empty array initially. And now in here, we're going to say set to-dos to be the previous. And then we're going to make a new array out, and it's going to be to-dos, or to do the new one, and dot, 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 previous. Okay. Now this to-do is actually going to be something a little different. Right now, all we're getting is a string. Is that true? Go back and look. Actually, I think we're getting just the task. So we're getting an object. That's fine. So here we're going to say to do dot ID equals, we'll give it an ID. So math dot random. We'll make it a string. And then we'll say to do dot done equals false. All right. Now, what's going on here? Do I have a typo? Oh, of course, none of this belongs in here. There we go. Okay, so now we do have a handle submit done, right? But it didn't actually work, apparently. And that is because we never passed our to-dos list in. And now all of our tests pass, and we can actually add to-dos. So with that, I think it's time to make a commit here. And this is feature, really. This is feature add